mic. Well, okay, with the permission of the director, sir, and Honorable HOD, sir, I would like to start with the program. First of all, I would like to welcome Honorable Chancellor, sir, Mr. Rajiv Kotiwal, Pro Chancellor, sir, Mr. Abhinav Kotiwal, Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor MP Pandey, Pro Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Rahul Misra, Registrar, sir, Mr. Sanjeev Agarwal, and our eminent speaker, Dr. Nagendra Singh, respected deans, directors, HODs, my dear colleagues, and my dear participants. You all are welcome for today's webinar titled Approaches in Drug Discovery. We are fortunate enough to have Dr. Nagendra Singh, Assistant Professor, Gautam Buddha University, who is going to share his extensive knowledge and experience on topic drug discovery. Before inviting Dr. Singh, I would like to share his brief profile with you all. Dr. Singh is a trained structural biologist currently working in Gautam Buddha University as assistant professor. He has completed his PhD in structural biology from AIMS, New Delhi. He has published over 60 papers in journals of high repute. He has research experience of over 19 years. He has successfully submitted over 225 PDB entries. For his work, he has been awarded more than 20 times at national and international platform. He is also the renowned member of Indian Crystallographic Association. He is currently working on two projects. Both are ICMR funded. And before inviting Dr. Nagendra Singh, I would like to say that this is a virtual platform. Please keep your mic muted to avoid any disturbances. Now, I would like to request Dr. Nagendra Singh to take over from here. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rajwardhan Singh. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, first of all, I'm really thankful to Rajwardhan Singh and everyone who is associated in organizing this webinar. And it's a great honor for me to interact with the students of this university. And these students, they are graduate students, or what kind of degree they are going through?
So graduate, postgraduate, and PhD scholars are also part of this webinar.
Okay, right. So I always tell my student, if you want to have a deeper learning of any subject, you should know how to raise questions. Whatever you follow in your life, you are studying or you are in classroom or you are outside, the curiosity should be there in your mind to ask questions. Whatever is not clear to you, whatever it may be, related to biotech or not, you should always raise your question. Only then you can learn something. Otherwise, it's very hard. And that's a very easy way of learning also. To have an effective learning session, questions should be there. So something which is not clear, that can be only understood by questions. And again, I thank again everyone for inviting me here. So I can share my screen from here. Okay. Is it visible?
No, sir. I think it's not visible. It's visible. Okay, it's visible, sir.
Okay. And does it move to the next slide also?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, right. So I'll try to share some ideas on how drugs are developed, although it's a very vast area. And today is due to this COVID time, and most of the people they already know how drugs are being developed and what kind of development scientists are making in order to get a effective molecule against this virus. So in this lecture, I'll try to share with you some basic fundamentals of drug discovery, or especially the structure-based drug discovery, where you use the structure of a target molecule and try to develop some compound which can inhibit function of that protein molecule and eventually can be a drug molecule in future after, of course, after passing through clinical trials and so many other steps. Then in second portion, I'll give you one example which we have done using in silico methods. That's about a drug repurposing for coronavirus 2, this new strain of coronavirus which has emerged in 2019, and the entire world is on toes because of this virus. So we have found out some drugs using in silico methods. Another approach of drug development that's called drug repurposing. So that also I'll give you some idea about a small piece of work which we have done in the last year. So before that, a drug is something, a substance or a molecule that has some kind of physiological effect. Of course, it should have a positive effect on the physiology when it's taken, is ingested or taken whatever route to the body. And if you take a drug which is legitimate for legitimate medical reason and you take it correctly as prescribed, you call that drug use. Or if you take a legal drug in an inappropriate way, that's called misuse of a drug. Or even if you take a drug which can endanger, which is not good for the body physiology, that's called drug abuse, or sometimes called substance abuse also. So this is not a very easy process to find a drug molecule. It's a very cumbersome way to get a drug molecule. In fact, statistically, if you begin with almost 10,000 compounds and you try to screen 10,000 compounds to find a drug, eventually you see that you get only one drug which may be approved by the regulatory bodies, because most of the compounds they fail in between steps of drug development. And of course, it's a very expensive process also. You have to spend billions of dollars to have a drug molecule in the market. So that's why pharma companies, they are not always keen to develop drug against everything. For example, this coronavirus is not the first time coronavirus came in this world. In fact, in 2002 also, it was emerged in China itself. And since then, there was no drug developed against this, because in 2002 and 2003, I think around 800 or 700 people died because of coronavirus strain 1. So that's why it was not noticed. And moreover, developing drug is a very tedious job, very expensive job. And probably that's why even pharma companies, they did not bother to find a drug against coronavirus 1 strains. So, and that got mutated eventually. And after almost 19, 20 years in 2019, that became coronavirus 2. And we are all facing that challenge now. So the developing drug is not easy. If you begin with 10,000 compounds, on second stage, which is preclinical development, you may have only 250 compounds, rest will fail. Then if these compounds, you go to the third level, which is clinical development, where these compounds, they go through for clinical evaluation of their efficacy, specificity, all the side reactions, so on. So only 5 compounds pass that test after clinical trials, and eventually out of those 5, only 1 may be approved eventually. So that's a very difficult job and very expensive as well. There are different ways a drug is found out. Combinatorial chemistry, where you have, say, n number of compounds, you have a big library of different chemical compounds, you can test all of them, you can screen them against a disease, And if you find some molecule effective, that may be selected and may be used as a drug eventually after clearing all the clinical hurdles. So there's also this method which is less rational because you have no idea about what kind of target drugs are binding and what kind of molecules you should take in order to find a drug. So that's kind of a blind approach. You call that combinatorial chemistry. The another method of developing drug could be if you know that, for example, if you know like aspirin is may be used as a drug for something. So aspirin can be taken, it can be modified, some more groups can be added, and a library can be constructed for that ligand, and that library can be screened against a particular disease, and eventually a molecule which is showing maximum effect that can be selected as a drug against that problem. Then the current approach is structure-based drug design approach. That's also called target structure-based approach for developing drug. Kindly unmute your mic, whosoever hasn't done that. Okay, so this is very recent approach, and this rational is also called rational structure-based drug design approach as well, because here you know the structure of a molecule which is causing problem. For example, in case of coronavirus, we know that there are many enzymes of this virus which are required for its life cycle. So somehow if you can target, if you can inhibit those enzymes which are required for life cycle of this virus, that molecule may work as a drug. Okay, there's some interruption going on. Is everything all right with the audience? So,
Student, please mute your mic. Kindly mute your mic, please.
you can do at your end also, Rajwardhan. Being moderator,
Yes,
you can mute anybody. You can mute me too if you want.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Yeah, you mute it from your side. Okay, so in target structure-based drug design, a target is taken. Target means a protein, mostly a protein molecule, an enzyme molecule, which is really required for functioning of the problem, functioning of the disease. So that protein can be selected, its structure may be solved, and we know that proteins have a tertiary structure, something like, for example, if you draw something like this. So in the tertiary structure, you will have binding site where substrate binds. So if you inhibit this binding site by designing complementary molecules, so that molecule may work as an inhibitor to this enzyme. And if this is very specific and has very high potential to inhibit the enzyme, it may be taken further to develop a drug. So that's what is done in today's time. The drugs are developed using a structure-based approach, where the structure of the enzyme, which is critical for a pathological state, for a disease, that is determined, and using that structure, some ligand which can bind to the active site of the enzyme, they are screened out, they are found out, they are explored, and they are further used for evaluation as a drug molecule. So in this structure-based approach, the first thing you do is you find a target, the molecular target. Three-dimensional structure of a target should be known. And most of the target, they are protein molecule, they are enzymes which are involved in the pathological state. So once you have three-dimensional structure, you know that it has some active site somewhere, because knowing 3D structure means knowing shape of the enzyme or knowing everything about the enzyme at atomic level. So you also understand by the structure that where substrate binds. For example, if this is the active site, you can characterize it with your own eyes. You can see it yourself in computer, and looking at that site, what kind of amino acids are there, what kind of stereochemistry of the substrate binding site is there. Looking at that, you can design a compound which can fit into the binding site, for example, here. So this is active site of the enzyme. So using chemical methods, or even you can use computational methods as well, to design a compound which can fit into the active site. So when a compound fit into the active site of the enzyme, this enzyme cannot bind to its substrate. So it cannot catalyze the reaction where it is made for. So that's why this enzyme is inhibited. And if this enzyme is, of course, involved in pathological state in causing disease, so this compound which you have designed, that can be taken up as an inhibitor to the enzyme and can further evaluate it for its further specificity, which can be used as a drug. So that's what is done in a structure-based approach. You can model a ligand which can fit into the active site. And after that, you take this ligand and you do evaluation, experimental evaluation, in vitro evaluation. You use the same enzyme, do the kinetic studies using same drug, and you see whether this drug is capable of inhibiting the same enzyme in vitro as well or not. And if you see that this drug is capable of inhibiting in vitro, it's showing some inhibition constant, then it can be taken up further to develop a drug. So the very first step is selection of target in a structure-based drug. That's a very critical step also. For example, this is an example of developing the drugs against pain and inflammation. These drugs we take as painkillers, they are basically called non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or in short, you call them NSAIDs. And they have a huge market in the world because on the globe, you will find rarely anybody who has not taken a painkiller in his or her life. Painkillers are very common, diclofenac, ibuprofen, and so many. So in developing these painkillers, basically this pathway is called eicosanoid production pathway. You might have seen in biochemistry, where one enzyme called phospholipase A2, it hydrolyzes phospholipids from membrane. And as a result of course, external stimuli, and this phospholipase liberate arachidonic acid here. So this arachidonic acid, which is 20 carbon fatty acid, it is further acted upon by cyclooxygenase enzymes, COX enzymes. There are two isoforms, you call them cyclooxygenase 1 and COX2. And as a result of these action of COX1 and COX2, you have prostaglandins and thromboxanes produced in the cell. And these compounds are basically mediators of inflammation. They cause inflammation. You feel inflammation because of these compounds. So what these painkillers, non-steroidal drugs do, they bind to these enzymes, COX1 and COX2. They are inhibitor of these enzymes. So when you inhibit these enzymes, production of prostaglandins and thromboxanes, that is reduced. And that's how the painkillers act in your body in order to reduce pain. So the very important step in designing drug is you find out any enzyme which is critical for production of those compounds which are causing problem in your body. Like if you are designing like antiviral compounds or antibacterial compounds, you need to find out any enzyme of those pathogen which is responsible for, which is very much required for the life cycle of that pathogen. So that's how you can inhibit growth of that organism. So in this approach, the first thing is once you find out which target protein, which target enzyme is crucial for survival of pathogen or which is leading to the disease, you determine structure of that target enzyme. Three-dimensional structure means shape of the enzyme, how it looks like, how atoms are arranged, how its shape is, and how it binds to substrate and so on. So you can determine 3D structure of the enzyme. There are different methods. In fact, the very common method, very popular method, which is used to develop, to explore 3D structure of protein, that's called X-ray diffraction or X-ray crystallography method, where you need to crystallize proteins, and after crystallization, you bombard with X-rays, and eventually you solve 3D structure of the enzyme. The second method, which is generally employed in case where protein is not crystallizable, in that case, you can use spectroscopy like NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy may be used, or there is a very new method coming up that's called cryo-electron microscopy. So using cryo-electron microscopy also, you can determine 3D structure of biomolecules. So use either of the method, whichever suitable and applicable, and you determine 3D structure of the target enzyme. Then you need to understand the catalysis, how this enzyme bind to the substrate and convert into product, because your eventual aim is to inhibit this enzyme so that it doesn't do catalytic activity, it doesn't have catalytic activity in presence of the inhibitor. So you understand the catalysis and how substrate binds, where it binds in the active site. That active site is explored. Once you have 3D structure in front of you, you can find out that where is the active site of the enzyme, and of course you can make complex with the substrate or substrate analogs, so that you understand well how ligands or substrate binds to the enzyme at the active site. All the amino acids which are responsible for recognition of substrate, they are understood by solving structure of the protein, structure of the target enzyme. And so the idea here is to have complete mapping of the substrate binding to the enzyme. You know how substrate binds because you are going to replace substrate with an inhibitor. So before doing so, you need to have complete knowledge of all the amino acids which are involved in binding of the substrate and catalysis. Then there's a typical flow for structure-based drug design. You produce target in laboratory. And how do you produce target in laboratory? For example, if you want to produce a protein, the simplest method today is by cloning and expression. You take a gene of that protein, you insert into some vector and express in suitable host. So protein is produced in abundance, in good amount in laboratory. By this method is called cloning expression method. So once you produce the protein, you apply any of the method of structure determination like crystallography. And once you have a structure available, you think of some compound which can bind to the protein molecule. You design some compounds, you model those compounds in the active site, you synthesize those compounds, and you check them for biological activity. Or the cycle may get repeated again. You find more compounds, better, you improve the binding affinity of a compound by making corrections using chemical methods, like you add more groups, more suitable complementary groups, or you remove some groups so that the binding affinity of the compound is maximized with the enzyme. And once you have that compound, that may be called a lead compound. So lead compound can be taken up for biological testing. And in biological testing means in laboratory, you find out whether this compound really binds to the enzyme or not. And if yes, to what strength, what is the binding constant of the compound to the enzyme, that can be evaluated, and that can be further taken up for preclinical development. Preclinical development means know this compound which is having maximum affinity. Those compounds are tested using animal models, like if you are developing drugs against, say, coronavirus. So in that case, what you do, you need to find out animal model for coronavirus, so that this molecule, not drug yet, but the molecule you have designed or synthesized, that can be tested on animal models. If it shows positive effect, that will be further taken up for clinical trials. Or today's, in fact, due to advent of computational biology, there are very good tools and algorithms available which can screen, in fact, millions of compounds in a very short time using in silico approaches. So in that way also you can find out drugs, you can find out compounds which have highest affinity against that target enzyme, and those can be used for biological evaluation later on. So there are two very important aspects when you design compound against any enzyme. The one is stereochemical complementarity. Stereochemical complementarity means how strong attractive interaction that compound make with the target enzyme, and that also represent affinity, how strong affinity the compound has for that enzyme. So that is basically maximized by introducing more attractive intermolecular interactions between those compounds and the target enzyme. And the second is a conformational rigidity. And conformational rigidity means when you have any organic compound, it may have n number of conformers because of rotation of single bonds. So in that way, the specificity is minimized. Means if you have multiple conformer for same compound, that compound can bind to other target also. So that give rise to adverse reaction in the body. So that is very important aspect. In fact, this is evaluated using clinical trials, and that's why clinical trials, they run for very long period of time in order to find out their specificity or if they have any adverse reaction eventually. So this is a typical diagram where you can see this is an enzyme, And this is the active site of the enzyme. For example, this drug, this compound, not drug yet, but it's a compound which bind to the enzyme. We see here that there is still some space where this compound can be extended, something like here. There's extra space here. So some more group can be added to these areas so that more space of the active site is filled by the compound. And that give rise to more number of attractive interaction between this compound and the enzyme. And when you have more number of attractive interaction, it means the affinity is increased. And that's the primary objective in preclinical development. When you do drug design in laboratory, you start with the laboratory work using in silico methods. You ensure that the compound you have got that has maximum affinity against the target enzyme. And that is evaluated by looking at number of attractive interactions the compound makes with the target enzyme. So that's how by adding more groups, affinity can be increased. And same time, because they are single bonds here, they are free to rotate. And when they rotate, it means they are more conformer possible for this compound. And when you have more conformer means same compound, but the orientation of group is different. So in that way, if you have more number of conformer available for a compound, the chances for that compound to bind more enzymes, more different enzymes is high. That means you are developing compound against one enzyme, but the same compound can bind to some other enzyme also. So that should be checked. So that is not desired here. So in order to check the number of conformer, one can introduce double bond here. For example, yeah, this is here. So when you add double bond, we know that double bond cannot be rotated. So it gives rigidity to the structure. So now this structure become more rigid, more complementary. So at the same time, your idea of increasing affinity and specificity that is attained. So by introducing double bond, you can rigidify the structure. So number of conformer can be reduced. So that specificity is increased. And same time, you add more groups so that attractive interactions of the compound with the target enzyme that is also optimized, that's maximized. So there are only two things you can look after when you are developing a drug against any target enzyme. That's what you do in laboratory. In fact, using in silico methods and making complexes of the compound with the target enzyme, analyzing those interactions. That's what you can do for developing drug. Then how do you find out stereochemical complement? Being a student, you should know that hydrogen bond is a very important attractive interaction which is found in biological systems. In fact, in all biological macromolecules, and also in a drug and receptor complex. When you design a compound, you also look for hydrogen bond donor and acceptor. So basically, hydrogen bond, if you remember, hydrogen bond is a non-covalent interaction which can exist between, if you have hydrogen attached to a non-polar atom, for example, more electronegative atom like N or O or F. So in that case, because NOF, they have high electron pulling tendency, so the shared pair of NH of these electrons, shared pair of electron that is pulled towards nitrogen. And that's what gives rise to partial positive charge to H and partial negative charge to N here. And this partial positive charge hydrogen proton, when it is in vicinity of another electronegative, another polar group like oxygen here, because oxygen is also partially negative charge because of lone pair. So this attractive force exists between negative and positive. And this attractive force is called hydrogen bond. Right. So you maximize number of hydrogen bond between a receptor and a compound you are designing in order to have a drug molecule. And this also help in specificity. Also, you remember in base pairing, like thymine, AT and GC base pairing, you must be knowing in case of DNA structure, we know that A and T, they have only 2 hydrogen bond possible. That is because of stereochemistry of adenine and thymine bases. You see here, there are only 2 possibilities between AT pairing where hydrogen bond is possible, here and here. The third one is not possible because this is very far. In order to have any attractive interaction distance matters a lot. The distance should be optimum. If there are two groups which can interact, but they are not located nearby, there will not be any interaction between them. So CH, moreover, CH bond is not polarized. You need to have some N or O group here. So in case of AT pairing, only two possibilities of hydrogen bond is there. That's why you see in adenine and thymine, they have only two hydrogen bonds in pairing. Similarly, if you look at in CG-based pairing cytosine and guanine, there are three positions which are nearby when pairing occurs. And because of these three positions, you have three hydrogen bond between these G and C nucleotides. So hydrogen bond also help to gain specificity in some aspects. The another non-covalent interaction which exists between biomolecules and of course between a compound and its target protein is ionic interaction. If you have two charge group, positive and negative charge group, when they come close, they attract each other, and the attraction is basically governed by Coulomb's law. So Coulomb's law is a Coulombic interaction where the force between two groups would be equal to the charge plus or minus charge, the magnitude divided by the distance. If the distance is r, so it's inversely proportional to r squared. And of course, it's a pH dependent interaction, because when you change pH, we know that charge also change on the group. If you have low pH or high pH, charge also accordingly get altered, and that's why ionic interactions are pH dependent interactions. So your idea here developing compound is you find hydrogen bond or ionic interaction, whatever possible, between a compound which is being designed and the target protein molecule. Then once you have found out a compound that is inhibiting protein is strong enough, then there are several checkpoints which it has to go through. For example, one of the checkpoints for drug development is called Lipinski rule. That's basically rule for drug likeliness. It means a drug, generally we know that most of the drug, they are taken orally. So when you take anything orally, when you eat anything, it should get absorbed in the body, it should go to the blood. If it's not going to the blood, that's useless. So for example, when you take say aspirin or ibuprofen, any drug you take, it will go to your stomach or intestine, and from there, because these drugs are foreign molecules, body does not recognize them. So body has no receptor for these molecules. So these drugs should be diffused freely across lipid bilayer, either in stomach or intestine cell lining. So in order to have a drug which can diffuse easily across lipid bilayer, this rule is applied, and this rule says the octanol water partition coefficient log P should be less than 5. So log P means that tells you about the relative lipophilicity of the drug. It should be lipophilic, because we know that lipid bilayer is non-polar in nature. So anything which has to diffuse across lipid bilayer, that also should be non-polar to some extent. So what extent it should be non-polar to get diffused, that is defined by the value of log P. So log P value should be around 5, so that it can efficiently diffuse from intestinal membrane, mucosal membrane or stomach membrane when you take it orally. Then the second rule is the molecular weight should be less than 500 Dalton, because if you have larger molecule, diffusion become limited there. So that's why these drugs you take orally, most of them, in fact almost, they will have less than 500 Dalton molecular weight. So you need to remember when you are designing a compound, that the molecular weight also should not be very big drug. It should have less than 500 Dalton molecular weight. Then number of hydrogen bond acceptors should be 10 or less. Hydrogen bond donors should be 5 or less. Donor and acceptor means in case of hydrogen bond, for example, this is an example of hydrogen bond. So here NH, hydrogen is covalently linked to the N atom, nitrogen atom. So nitrogen is called donor of hydrogen bond. Similarly, the oxygen atom, which is pulled by this positive charge of proton, this is called acceptor. So number of donor and acceptor also should be limited in order to have proper diffusion of the drug when it's taken orally. So it was given by scientists called Lipinski, and on the same way it is also called Lipinski rule of 5 as well. In fact, there are 4 rules, but they are called Lipinski rule of 5 because you have all the values multiple of 5, 5, 10, 500 and 5. So if 2 or more of these rules are violated, the compound may have problem with the oral bioavailability. Oral bioavailability means when you take it orally, it will not be available to the blood, because anything which has to go into the body and show some effect, that compound should reach to the blood, because blood is like carrier of everything in the body from one cell to another cell and tissues. So everything which is in the blood, that will be accessible to all the cells in the body. So that's why when you take orally any compound, that compound should be absorbed well in the intestinal epithelial cell or stomach epithelial mucosal cells, so that it can reach to the blood, and from there it can go to different places of action wherever it is desired. Then another point is hydrophobicity. Hydrophobicity is very important. A drug is always, you see all the drugs which you take orally, these all drugs are hydrophobic in nature, and along with the diffusion across lipid bilayer, hydrophobicity also play a role in improving binding affinity. For example, if you have a hydrophobic compound and you keep that into aqueous media, so it will go for hydrophobic effect, means it doesn't like, a non-polar compound cannot be happy in a polar solvent, so it tend to get aggregated. So that's how it happens. A drug which is non-polar, that will find its receptor and form complex quickly. It means the binding affinity will be higher, and that's the reason almost all the drugs, they are hydrophobic in nature, so that affinity is maximized between drug and its receptor. So just to give you some idea about hydrophobic effect, for example, if you have a fatty acid here and you try to dissolve that into water, aqueous media, in body everything is aqueous. So in that way, what will happen? It has a long non-polar tail, fatty acid, we remember that, and you have polar head group. So this long non-polar tail is not soluble in water, because water is charged in polar solvent. So like dissolved, like the rule applies here. So if anything is polar and charged, it will be happy with the water. It can be easily solubilized. But if something is non-polar, it cannot interact with the water. So it will not be soluble in the water. So what will happen when you try to dissolve this fatty acid into water? The water molecule, they do not interact with the fatty acid. They try to lie themselves on the periphery. They surround fatty acid, but without interacting. So some gap is formed between water and the fatty acid tail, which is non-polar in nature. And in fact, what happens? Air is trapped here. And you remember when you have a non-polar substance and you try to add into water and shake it, a frothing occurs. Like if you, for example, proteins you have in solution, you are dealing with proteins, you shake it, there is a frothing. Or you have soap. When you have soap and you try to disturb it, you have frothing. That frothing is because of this reaction you have, because the water molecule, they align themselves across periphery of the non-polar fatty acid, and in between air is trapped. So this air comes out when you shake it. So the same thing happens. So when you have fatty acid here, the water molecule, they align themselves, but they do not interact. So what happens? These water molecules, they have their freedom is curtailed. Freedom means in thermodynamics, that's called entropy, if you remember. So entropy of these water molecules is limited because they line themselves around this non-polar tail. And when you have another molecule of fatty acid dissolved, you have more water molecule with lesser entropy. And same time, when you keep increasing number of molecules, non-polar molecules in water, more water molecule, they have lesser entropy. And in fact, this is also cause disruption of surface area into water because of this cavity. This also cavity formation, kind of cavity on the water surface are formed because of this non-polar compound. So then what happens, because when you have more water molecule with limited and reduced entropy, so thermodynamically that's not a favorable situation. We know that from law of thermodynamics. So entropy of anything, entropy means freedom. For example, if you talk about water in a glass, all the water molecules, they are free to move wherever they want. So they have maximum entropy. But if you stop them, if you curtail, if you control their freedom, so water molecule will not like it. It become thermodynamically unstable state. So that's what happens when you have non-polar compound. You tend to dissolve that into water. So it leads to curtailed entropy of many water molecules. But water molecules, their entropy can be suppressed for only for a given period of time. When you have more number of water molecule with lesser entropy, these water molecule will push these hydrophobic substance together. So what will happen when they push these hydrophobic substance together? At least the water molecule which are in between, they are removed. So their entropy is increased. So in that way, lesser number of water will have with curtailed entropy. For example, here. So when these three molecules, if you try to dissolve them, so these three molecule, when they are pushed together, at least in between water molecule, they are free. So system become thermodynamically more stable. So this process of aggregation of non-polar substances, this is called hydrophobic effect, and this is governed by entropy of water molecules. So that's why when you have any non-polar substance and you dissolve in water, it tend to aggregate. It doesn't remain soluble. And in fact, you require a minimum concentration of the compound to have complete aggregation. In case of, in fact, if you remember mycelial formation means if you add more compound, the arrangement of this aggregation would be so that non-polar tails, they are buried in the core. It's like a football like structure where in the center, in the mid inside the football, you have all non-polar things, and on the surface you have polar head group which can interact with water happily. So this is called mycelic, critical mycelic concentration, fixed CMC value depending on their structure and their hydrophobic and polar behavior. Okay, so if we summarize the development of the drug, there are 4 stages of drug development. The first is drug discovery. Drug discovery, which is done in laboratory, like you start with from gene or genome sequencing. You, for example, in case of this coronavirus, the first thing scientists do, I think by March 2020, the whole genome was sequenced. And after that, people started thinking to develop a drug. So this is first step to know genome composition of the organism or the gene structure which you are targeting. So then you find out target molecule, which enzyme of that pathogen should be inhibited so that this growth of the pathogen can be controlled. That's called target discovery. Then you validate the target to see whether it's really controlling the target activity is really affecting growth of the microbe or not. And then you, of course, in laboratory, you discover some compounds which are potent inhibitor of that enzyme. And those compounds, they are taken to preclinical development. That's basically part of animal studies. You first try those compounds on animal models. You cannot give everything to human because society believe that human life is more precious than animals. So that's why first you try them on animals, and if you succeed, those compounds can be taken for clinical testing. Clinical testing on humans. There are, in fact, 4 or 5 phases of clinical trials. You call them phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, in order to check efficacy and any side reaction, any adverse reaction of the drug compound. The drug has to go through different clinical trials. And once you have that a drug compound has no side effect and if efficacy is very high, it efficiently block activity of the target enzyme in body as well, then it can go for manufacturing and after that distribution. So these many steps every drug has to go through. and it takes I think 10 to 15 years. I think the minimum time taken so far for a vaccine or drug is 5 to 6 years, and generally 10 years is the optimum time a drug takes to come into the market, so it becomes accessible to people, and it can be given to the people in order to get rid of a pathophysiological state. And of course, very expensive process also. So in different phases, like phase one clinic, once you have some compounds which have passed through the animal studies, their safety and absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion, bioactivities, that can be evaluated in healthy volunteers which have no indication. They are means they are healthy. They do not have a disease yet, but in the first stage of clinical trials, in first phase, a drug or vaccine is tested on healthy people. So when you test on healthy people, you come to know whether this drug has any adverse reaction or not to the healthy people. And generally, less than 100 people, volunteers, are selected in the phase one clinical trials. And of course, you also know that this drug is or does it also interact with any other drug as well, that also tested in phase one clinical trials, and that goes on 6 to 12 months time. So this much time is required to have complete detail, complete profile of a compound to be drug eventually. Then once a compound goes through phase one trials, then is given to the subject, to the volunteers who have the problem. So generally less number of people, less than 100, generally is given around 100 people, to check whether this drug is efficient, does it able to cure the problem it has been designed for. And that process take around 1 to 2 years. In the phase three is a very important one. That compounds, they are tested to hundreds to even 1,000 volunteers, and from there the formulation, how much drug is to be given, that is known, and if there is any adverse reaction in the long term, that is also evaluated, and that's why it takes 2 to 3 years minimum. So you have the complete profiling of the drug available before actually it is prescribed by doctors. And then of course in phase 4, the quality of life of the people who drugs have been given to, that is tested for long term. That's ongoing. In fact, there's no time limit for the phase 4 trials. It keep going on for years and years. And if some contraindication, if any problem, adverse reaction is found, that is reported. And that's why in fact some drugs, they can be taken back after say decades or so time also, if any adverse reaction has been found out later on. So it's a very long process to have a drug molecule, a efficient drug molecule without any adverse reactions. So to have new treatments of a problem, there are 3 main strategies. You can design drugs, like we have seen. You can find out target molecule, target enzyme, and you can find compounds which can inhibit the target enzyme, and that is designing of drugs. Or you can design vaccines also, like if you are dealing with pathogens, in those cases vaccine also may be developed. Or the another approach is drug repurposing. These two approaches, they are very lengthy process. They take very long time, because having a new molecule in the market to test its efficiency, its efficacy, its any adverse reaction if there is, so that's a very long process. So that's why these steps, they are very lengthy step. There is another step, which is shortcut, that's called drug repurposing. So what is done in this drug repurposing or drug repositioning, the same thing. If there are available drugs for different diseases, those drugs can be tested for the new disease. For example, you must be knowing in COVID, remdesivir. This is one of the examples which have been developed using drug repurposing. This is a common antiviral compound. It has been found that this common compound, this inhibit SARS coronavirus 2 as well. So remdesivir is taken as an emergency medicine, which is developed using drug repurposing method. So in fact, in drug repurposing, you can use approved drugs or current drug candidate which have not been approved yet, or failed candidates. Those also can be tested. Or orphan drugs. Orphan drugs means drugs which are developed for rare conditions. Generally, if a disease is rare, pharma companies, they don't tend to find drug against that because very cumbersome process in market is not
Excuse me,
there.
sir. Excuse me,
Yes,
sir.
yes, Raj.
Mohammed Talib, please switch off your camera. Now you can continue, sir.
Okay, so you can use a drug which is available in the market or which is not available, which has failed or which is orphan drug. Those can be tested for the new problem, or even combination can be tested in order to find a quick solution to the problem. But even drug repositioning, that also take around 3 to 12 years to have a effective drug in the market. So that's what we can say, that getting a drug is a very time consuming as well as expensive process. So now in the second part, I'll give you some idea about some study in silico studies we have performed on COVID-19, an enzyme called endoribonuclease from COVID-19 SARS coronavirus 2. So endoribonuclease, ENDO-U is in short, it's called ENDO-U. The structure is available. It was known that what kind of amino acids are there in the active site which are capable to bind to the substrate. That is already known because 3D structure is available. So what we did, we took this 3D structure of ENDO-U from SARS coronavirus 2 strain. Then we have used FDA-approved drugs, around 4,000 drugs have been taken up using in silico methods. So that's called high throughput virtual screening. So these drugs, computer algorithms are available where these drugs can be tested on binding to the substrate binding site. And then the best binder, which have very high potential to bind to the enzyme, those can be selected. And those after selection, they are docked on the substrate binding site. And docking is a process, is a in silico process where a compound can be fitted into the active site, and their intermolecular interactions and affinity can be calculated. So docking was done. After docking, molecular dynamic simulations were performed. Molecular dynamic simulation means this everything is happening in silico, but in aqueous solution in cell, it may not happen at all. So there are computer programs available which can try to mimic in vivo environment. So that's called molecular dynamic simulation, where atoms are kept flexible. They are allowed to move wherever they want. So it mimic like actually what happens in aqueous environment when you have drug and enzyme interaction. Then their binding energies were calculated. And finally, some potent drugs which have very high affinity, those were tested. And we have found out that there are 5 drugs which have very strong interactions with ENDO-U, like glycoxide is anti-diabetic drug, idarubicin is anti-leukemic, dihydroergotamine is used for migraine, and tesortan is angiotensin 2 receptor antagonist. Similarly, ergotamine is also used for migraine. So these 5 compounds were found to be best binder to ENDO-U from all the FDA approved compounds available on database. And their binding energy using in silico methods, you can calculate how strongly these compounds bind, and that strength is measured in terms of their van der Waals energy, electrostatic energy, and so on. Those all numbers were calculated, and they were found to be in good range to be considered as good inhibitor for the enzyme. Then similarly, molecular dynamic simulations were performed, and from simulation studies, it was found out that these drugs, they bind strongly to the enzyme without affecting structure of the enzyme. Similarly, stability were checked. These are all in silico programs output, which indicate how strongly those drugs bind to ENDO-U, and there is no structural perturbation as a result of binding of drugs to the enzyme. So these I'm not going into detail, but these are basically all the validation parameters. Even secondary structural elements in all the cases, those were same after binding and before binding. That indicate that drugs, they are not causing any structural change to the enzyme. They are complementary enough to the active site of that enzyme, so they can bind easily. They can diffuse into the active site, and can easily fit into the substrate binding site. Anyone using computational programs, one can find out what kind of amino acids are interacting to the drug. So this is one program, the output from one of the program, which can tell these positions of amino acids which interact with the drug during simulation. And all the drugs, all the compounds, they bind to the same site in the surface of the endo-U enzyme and makes attractive interactions in terms of hydrogen bond and van der Waals forces. So for example, this is the enzyme surface, and all these drugs, these dotted lines show intermolecular attractive interactions. So you have hydrogen bonds available between drug and the endo-U enzyme, which is target here. Then this is the substrate binding site, the active site of the enzyme, this one. So all the compounds, all the drug which we have found out, they all bind to the same site. For example, this is in fact is a control compound, AMP, and another this drug, they also bind to the same another drug, and so on. So all the drugs, they occupy same area in the substrate binding site. So we can assume that all these drugs, they may work as competitive inhibitor to this enzyme. So of course, after this, these have to be evaluated using in vitro studies before we think of using them against coronavirus strain 2. So then I thank Gautam Buddha University and few grants we have got from DST, ICMR, and CSIR, so that students keep doing some work, they keep getting their PhD degree or fellowships and so on. And thank you very much to all of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed a very learned lecture. And now it's question answer time. Anybody who wants to ask a question, they can unmute themselves and they can ask. कोई क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहता हो कोई भी, वो अपने को अनम्यूट कर सकता है और क्वेश्चन पूछ सकता है. Okay. Yes. Should I start, sir? I should ask.
Okay.
You have performed computationally?
Sadly, not yet done. Ask question, whatever within
Hello, sir.
Saxena.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, sir.
Regarding drug designing. Sir, I have some questions.
You can never trust in silico program completely. So when you dock something, you take any compound, you take any receptor, it will be docked somewhere or the other, right? So in that way, the very important part is how do you select compound which is rightly docked. The first thing is it should bind to the right place. Right place means if you are looking for inhibitor of an enzyme, it should bind to the many times these computational programs, docking programs, they can give you better values on some other place than the active site also. So you need to visualize. You take the PDB coordinates, visualize yourself using some Hoot, PyMol, or there are many programs for visualization, and you see that the compound should bind to the active site only. That's the first thing. Second thing, then you grade it as per the energy. That's what you can do using docking. If energy is after
Yes,
MD
sir.
simulation, if it is still there and is giving good energy, that you can consider, okay, this is good enough to go further. Only docking will not help.
So the second thing is that if we go for the molecular simulation, then in India, I know you know very well, sir. It's very hard. Means it's a very typical process. We don't mostly we don't have such systems, right? If we go to molecular simulation, first of all, we have to select the structure.
Yes.
This is the point actually, sir. Which structure we should select, like the hydrogen bond, maximum hydrogen bond, or delta minus delta G, and what? Yes, sir.
You look at the docking, you energy delta G, look at the delta G. In fact, hydrogen bond delta G is calculated including all intermolecular interactions. You have hydrogen bond or hydrophobic effect, whatever. So delta G is the correct value to give you idea. And not only one. For example, if you have got, say, gradation of 100 structures, so at least take top 5, which are good one, where ligand is binding at the active site, and you go for simulation. If you happen to be that all the 5 after simulation they are not behaving well, then you go to the next level, take further down, next 5 or so on, until you get a good drug which is remaining, which retain binding affinity after simulation. So that's what you can do. But of course simulation take long time and you require good computers. So you can access, in fact, IIT Delhi, they have a server where one can access, or BRAF is there in Pune. The
Yes,
BRAF
sir. Yes.
facility is there. You can access, you can get your account made there, and you can access the facility as per availability. So that can be done. Or if you have any lab nearby who have good programs available, computers are there, and so on, you can talk to the people and get in touch.
Okay. The final thing is, we should select first top 5, right?
Yes.
Top 5 ranks. Okay. Sometimes, sir, on the first rank, we don't have any hydrogen bonds. And the right.
I don't know. I've not seen technically, but if hydrogen bond is there, some other attractive interaction would be always there. Otherwise, it won't be ranked first. It should have, see, when you say delta G or binding affinity is a cumulative effect of all kind of intermolecular interactions. So those interaction may be charge-based interaction, maybe polar uncharged interactions, or van der Waals
Yes.
context, whatever. Right. So considering all these intermolecular interactions, only you get delta G calculated. So if you follow delta G, that's fine. You follow delta G,
Yes.
grade them, and then go further for MDS. So whatever retains, then you can select and go further studies. That's what you can do.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Right. Thank you, Ridin.
And anyone else? Hello,
Okay.
anyone else who wants to ask the question?
Probably they did not like the lecture or they did not understand.
No, sir, it's not the case. Well, now I would like to call upon our Honorable HOD, sir, for both of the things. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rajvardhan. I hope I am audible to all. So, as we know that computer-aided drug discovery or design methods that play a major role in the development of therapeutically important small molecules. So there is a need to incorporate modern science and technology with traditional approaches in drug discovery, as its integration may prove as better therapy for various disease. With these words, I would like to extend my very warm good evening to all of you. Honorable Chancellor Sir Shri Rajiv Kothiwal, Pro-Chancellor Sir Shri Abhinav Kothiwal, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor M.P. Pandey, Pro-Vice Chancellor Sir Professor Rahul Mishra, Registrar Sir Shri Sanjeev Agrawal, Director of different schools, faculty members, and my dear students. On the behalf of the School of Biotechnology, IFT University, I, Dr. Nabil Ahmed, extends a heartfelt thanks to the keynote speaker, Dr. Nagendra Singh. Thank you so much, sir, for delivering an outstanding content on approaches in drug discovery. In today's webinar, Dr. Singh have discussed the most important methods and techniques for drug discovery. I believe this lecture was beneficial for all of us. Thank you so much, sir, for connecting virtually with us during this pandemic. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Honorable Chancellor, sir, Pro-Chancellor, sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Pro-Vice Chancellor, sir, Registrar, sir, for their kind support and encouragement during the organization of this program. I would also like to thank my sincere thanks to the faculty members of School of Biotechnology in organizing this event. I must thank everyone present here for their interest, support, and patience. Thank you. Over to you, Rajvardhan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now, all the participants, this was the end, and I hope you have enjoyed the lecture. And I would like to personally thank Dr. Nagendra, sir. Actually, you have been an inspiration for me, always been an inspiration for me, sir. And
I am a tiny man, Rajvardhan. No.
So this is the greatness that you have.
Okay, thank you so
hopefully
much.
This next time we will meet, sir. We'll have a get together.
Sure. I'm always keen to interact with the students and people like you, Rajvardhan, and Dr.
Sir.
Nabil.
Thank you.
Thank you
It's my
so
pleasure,
much.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, sir. All the participants, you will get the feedback link, and after filling that feedback link, you will get your certificate. Now you can leave. Thank you.